There is a story in the Washington Post, which you got to remember, Pravda on the Potomac is a big rival for the title of America's most liberal newspaper. You've got to go up the East Coast to New York, and you got the New York Times, and these two newspapers are vying back and forth for the title of, the most anti-American newspaper in the country. And they both make a good claim to it and have historically made a good claim to it. So you might take this story with a bit of a grain of salt. It comes out of the Washington Post. The headline is this: The New York Times risked legal trouble to publish Donald Trump's tax return. In other words, oh, the Times is bad. We're good. Read us. Dean Beckett wasn't bluffing. That's the lead story here, or the lead line in the story. The New York Times executive editor said during a visit to Harvard in September that he would risk jail to publish Donald Trump's tax returns. Of course, he goes to Harvard to speak because he knows he's among fellow travelers. He made good on his word Saturday night when the Times published Trump tax documents from 1995, which show the Republican presidential nominee claimed losses of $916 million that year. Now, for you liberals listening, that's nearly $1 billion. See, a billion is 1,000 million. You got that? Just in case, you public school grads as well may have some difficulty with that. That's enough to avoid paying federal income taxes for as many as 18 years afterwards. But here's the thing: that's enough is not necessarily proof. It doesn't tell you whether he paid taxes or not. Even the Washington Post, which is criticizing its competitor, can't get away from saying, well, he could have. Newspapers used to deal in facts and not speculation, but obviously that's changed. And the writer does say federal law makes it illegal to publish an unauthorized tax return. Now, I heard Judge Napolitano saying this morning on Fox and Friends, the Times getting it in its hands and publishing it shouldn't be illegal. It should be illegal for someone to give it to them. But I think that this is a very gray area in between. Now, Donald Trump is wealthy enough where if he decided to take the Times to court, and these newspapers are no longer the big profit centers they used to be. 17% of the Times is owned by a billionaire from Mexico by the name of Carlos Slim. Mr. Slim is far wealthier than even Donald Trump. Actually, there are some Democrats on the Federal Elections Committee or Commission who would like to make it illegal for any company in this country that has some foreign ownership, such as 17%, to get involved with politics, which means the Times would no longer be able to endorse Democrats as it always does. The writer goes on to say it is unclear whether Baguette, that was the executive editor, was speaking hypothetically at the time or whether his newspaper already was in possession of the documents which were published Saturday. So there's a lot of areas here, but if Donald Trump decided to take them on, I don't think Mr. Slim from Mexico wants to get into a prolonged legal battle that could cost tens of millions of dollars because, again, as I say, these newspapers are no longer big profit centers. 10 minutes now after 9 o'clock. Bill Colley with you this morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310. KLIX at newsradio1310.com. You can reach our program today by dialing 736-0300, 736-0300. You're up next. You're on the air.
Good morning, Bill. This kind of does explain some things. So, Donald keeps complaining that he gets audited every year. This would make sense because they're checking his status every year as a businessman. And, in '05, I don't know too many businesses that made profits. And I know a lot of people that lost a lot of money. I worked for a company that sold high-dollar items, and they sold 110 units the year before, and in '05 they sold 35. So, they lost a lot of money.
Right.
And he did a lot of things that were high-dollar items. But the big key here is he filed a tax return that was accepted. So that means he did everything within the law. And Hillary has done everything outside the law. They're just trying to use this as smoke and mirrors.
She took in 2014, I guess, which is the last year we have her returns for right now. She took a write down as well and escaped paying taxes. The New York Times took a write down and as a business escaped paying taxes. And the reason this happens is because in Trump's case, as I mentioned last hour, if he just simply goes bankrupt, totally bankrupt and out of business, then thousands of people who work for him are out of jobs. The economy suffers. tens of thousands who work for him. The economy suffers, and they don't any longer pay taxes. The same with the New York Times Corporation. So the hypocrisy here is coming from multiple different directions.
And you're exactly right. And I bring this up all the time. There's direct taxing and indirect taxing. And the reason why businesses get breaks is because there's a ton of indirect taxing. Anyway, but this is the hypocrisy is if you get some of these high dollar people that donate to Hillary to show their tax returns in '05, I guarantee you they've had huge deductions.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I thank you for the call. Warren Buffett was cited in the last hour. Warren Buffett, one of those guys who has had numerous write downs, and he says he should be paying more taxes. As Rudolph Giuliani said, and I shared that clip in the last hour of the show, Rudolph Giuliani said, well, then just write out the check on your own and send it to the Treasury. No one's stopping you from doing that. No one. And again, the caller mentioned builders. If you're building homes and the market takes a hit, you have a couple of choices. You can either write it down and keep employing people to build homes, even though the market might be a little slow, or you can go out of business and everybody gets fired. Which one is better? I know for liberals out there, this is really difficult to understand because it's a little more complex than what you learned in Mrs. Smith's kindergarten. Oh, if Jimmy has a lollipop, he should bring one for everybody. I'll tell you what, the communism that goes on in our schools is. Speaking of communists, Michael Moore made an appearance yesterday on NBC's Meet the Press with Chuck Todd. Michael Moore, longtime ne'er-do-well, has predicted Donald Trump is going to win the election. Now, he's not happy about that, but listen to his explanation while he's talking to Mr. Todd.
From Green Bay to Pittsburgh is the middle of England, broken and depressed, struggling, the smokestacks strewn across the countryside with the carcass of what we used to call the middle class, angry, embittered, working and non-working people who were lied to by the trickle-down of Reagan and abandoned by Democrats. And I know after the debate, you were unlike many. You thought Trump was successful in what he needed to do. Explain.
Yes, which I don't want him to win. Let's just make that clear. I've been trying to say for months here. I live in Michigan, and across the Midwest, across the Rust Belt, I understand why a lot of people are angry, and they see Donald Trump as their human Molotov cocktail that they get to go into the voting booth on November 8th and throw him into a political system that has made their lives miserable. And so I think at the convention, I was worried Democrats, the Clinton campaign, were all doing an end zone dance when they were only on the 50-yard line.
Now, when you heard Todd in the beginning talking about, the Rust Belt and the like, he's quoting one of Michael Moore's apparently newspaper columns. I don't know, or he was writing for some special commentary, and maybe it's not a weekly type of thing that he does. But Moore's not alone. On the other hand, his newest ally also appeared on the program, and that's Glenn Beck, who you hear right here on a daily basis at News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And he's echoing some of what Michael Moore had to say.
I can't speak for Michael because I honestly, I don't watch much of what he does, and I'm sure he doesn't with me, but I warned about this. When they were mocking me for bringing up Nazis, the reason why I did many of the times was to warn about the rise of the uber right in Europe that would bleed into America, and it's happening. We have to change our course, and we have to change our course as individuals now.
Somehow people feel that the political rhetoric ratcheted up like it is. Beck went on to talk about how he did a Rodney King. Can't we all just get along? Well, the fact of the matter is, you've got one side that thinks it's okay to go around killing babies in their mother's wombs and spending the country into oblivion, and then you've got a group of people out there who want all of that to stop. This notion that there is somehow a compromised position. You can't cut the baby in half and say, well, we'll leave one half in the womb and we'll get rid of the other half. You understand what I'm talking about? There is no compromised position here. But this notion that, we're on the cusp of Nazism, I find that claim comes up. It's been coming up in my entire life. Oh, Richard Nixon is a Nazi. Oh, Ronald Reagan is a Nazi. Oh, George W. Bush is a Nazi. Well, here we still are. The fact of the matter is, people are just frustrated and angry because nothing works any longer in this country. They want something to work, and they're looking for someone who will make it work. That in itself should be the eye opener for even people like Michael Moore and Glenn Beck. 917, you're up next. You're on the air with Bill Colley on KLIX.
Well, I brought this up after the debate a week ago or whatever. Yeah, a week ago today was the debate. So the first 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and during the course of the debate, Trump kept talking about fiscal responsibility, running a tight ship, corporations staying home, and jobs. And like I said then, people in the Rust Belt, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, elsewhere, they want to have a job and they want to have a corporation that would appreciates them. And if you can't sense that he's passionate about that very thing, then I don't see, that you could be very bright. But you see, I think that people did sense that. And when you talk to people that in 08 and 12, where you were in a neighborhood where there was nothing but Obama signs, now it's Trump signs, 95% Trump, 5% Hillary. And this is not just the case in Ohio. It's in other states in the Rust Belt, because I've heard these people call in and talk about it and witness it themselves. And you get a feeling, talking to these people, hearing these people from these states, that they feel that Trump is going to do well in the Rust Belt. Well, if he wins Ohio, maybe we got this thing, huh? I'm going to hang up. Thanks.
And thank you. Well, I'll share a little bit from Nigel Farage, the British politician who was behind the Brexit, talking about that very thing. If we get an opportunity, I want to share that in this hour of the show. The thing to keep in mind for all this talk about, we're headed for Nazism, we're headed for folks, we have already had a corrupt regime running this country now. Let's be honest, for decades. Again, they're spending twice as much money as they're actually bringing in. Your civil liberties have already been curtailed. You've got people prying and looking at you wherever you go. You're always on camera when you're out in public. These are not things that just suddenly emerged or will emerge if Hillary or Donald or any of the other candidates are elected come January. We are living in a great big surveillance state. If you haven't noticed that, you've been out to lunch for a long, long time. We've got a short break ahead. Bill Colley with you this morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. We're at 49. Probably won't be getting a heck of a lot warmer than that today, but it is a slight warm-up since I actually sat down in this chair and started talking about, an hour and 20 minutes ago. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Don't forget it. I think we're all aware that the weather is going to be a little bit, probably actually below average for this time of year. The weathermen say below normal. Well, there's no normal. There's an average. So when they show you like a normal temperature, they're talking the average, which means sometimes this year or in October, every year, any year, it can be, 95. Other years it could be 55 or 45. But we are below the average, and it's going to continue apparently for a few more days. If you have not yet, and I would assume now you all tested that furnace and, discovered whether it's working or not working. If it's not working or if it's working poorly, you got to give the pros a call at Ramsey Heating and Electric. Ramsey's, of course, will come out and make sure the job's done right and done right the first time. Ramsey Heating and Electric is located in Burley at 2600 Overland Avenue. You can telephone 678-0459. They work hard to make sure that this is going to be a problem-free winter for you. In fact, they sell warm winters and cool summers. Telephone number to reach our program today is 736-0300, 736-0300. You're listening to Bill Colley on News Radio 1310. KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Caller, you're on the air.
Yeah, Bill, over the weekend, I heard a news report that Russia has issued an ultimatum that if we attack Syrian forces, they will respond with nuclear weapons against the U.S., and also that China made a statement that since we put the this new missile defense system in South Korea. America should get ready to pay a heavy price for that. I don't think we have competent people leading this country anymore that has put us in this kind of a dangerous situation.
Well,
I really don't.
We've ignored the Syrian situation for years. The Russians finally said to us, will you help us clean it up? And we still said no back in 2013. I say we. President Obama said no. So the Russians decided, well, we got to go in on our own and do it. And now, as they're actually cleaning it up, there's a concern that we would come in and because they're taking Aleppo now, which I know for Gary Johnson that's a bit of a stretch, but since the Russians are now taking that, there's a concern that the U.S. would come in and try to jump in at the last minute. That could actually end up harming Russian troops. I don't. This whole thing that the Russians are baddies is a holdover from the Cold War, but it seems to me we need to be allied with them against the Chinese and the North Koreans. But again, you're right. Nobody in Washington has the wherewithal to put two and two together.
I haven't heard this kind of rhetoric since I was in grade school in the 60s, hiding under a desk, listening to Khrushchev pound his shoe on the table, warning America. I don't have
Khrushchev,
confidence.
He sized up John Kennedy and thought he was a weakling, and so Kennedy had the standoff, obviously in October of 1962, and then the Russians discovered he wasn't quite so weak, but they've sized up Barack Obama, and they think he's a panty waist.
Thanks, Bill, for your insight.
Hey, thank you much for the call, sir. And why wouldn't they? Remember, he said, "Oh, I'm going to draw a red line here in the sand, and if Mr. Assad crosses it." By the way, in Mr. Assad's own country, what would Mr. Obama do if suddenly, a group of states, I don't know, the old Confederacy said we're leaving? Abe Lincoln did it, right? But if Mr. Obama said, "I'm going to draw a red line in the sand. If you cross it, you're done." So Assad crossed it. Well, okay, I'm going to back up 2 feet and draw another line. You're up next. You're on the air with Bill Colley at 927 on KLIX.
Bill, there are Hollywood people who say they will leave the country if Trump is elected. I would like to suggest that they go to Red China, and for better treatment, they mention Bill Clinton is their friend, since he helped them, Red China, get missile technology to improve their weaponry. Or Hollywood people should go to Iran and mention that they are friends of Obama and Valerie Jarrett.
Probably win them thank you for the call, a lot of allies in Iran. Of course, until they started saying, by the way, we're going to have a big cocaine party over at the mansion. You Muslims are all welcome to come over, and we'll have a lot of alcohol and some roast beef and a little pork, too. Oh, no, what are you getting so upset about? 928. Bill Colley with you on Top Story. I'll squeeze one last caller in. We've got about a minute before the break, and then one more half hour of the program still ahead. You're up next, and you're on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com.
Yeah, hello. That thing about Glenn Beck, thank you. I've been wanting to say that so long because he's turned into a traitor for me. But as far as Trump goes, he does have an ego, and he is proud of what he does, and he is always bragging about what he does. And I think he's going to do everything he says he's going to do just because that's the kind of person he is. And I think if Glenn Beck and people shut up and just wait and see, they'd find out. He's going to do it.
I think there's a great fear, and I thank you for the call, a great fear among many people, and Beck has become, after he went off and created his own network and the like, he has become, Beck, by the way, had a write-down in his taxes a couple of years ago, and he laid off about a quarter of the staff at the Blaze at the same time. So he's not immune to all of this, too, but Beck has become a major player and perhaps a bit of an elitist throughout all of this. I don't blame Beck in a sense for being concerned and thinking the country is off the rails. He just has a different view about where it's going than I do. Trump is not perfect by any means. I certainly didn't support him in the primaries, but I do agree that bravado and that bluster and a lot of the other, he's going to at least restore a notion that the United States isn't yet dead. That's a good thing. 9:30. More on this topic coming up in just a few minutes.